This presentation will discuss licensing options for open educational resources. I'm Suzanne Joachim. I'm the OER coordinator for Butte Community College in Northern California. I'm not, however, a lawyer. The information in this presentation is not meant to be legal advice, merely an introduction. If you'd like more information about the Creative Commons licenses, please go to creativecommons.org. To understand the licenses for OER, one must first understand that OER is part of a much larger open movement that includes such diverse aspects as computer programs, photos and music, scientific research, blueprints, and much, much more. Open content is also different from simply free content. Free content can be copyrighted materials that you can use without paying. This means you can link out to the resource in your course, but you can't download or embed it. Open content is also free, but it provides additional permissions based on the specific license that the creator has chosen. These include things like the ability to retain the content, meaning to download it and keep it for as long as you like, to reuse the content in a variety of different ways, revise the content, meaning to change it, add to it, delete from it, adapt it however suits your needs. Remix resources, meaning combine multiple resources together to create one larger entity, and then redistribute what you've created to others. Let's take a look at the Creative Commons licenses. Creative Commons began as a way to bridge the gap between public domain and copyright. Public domain resources are resources that you can do whatever you want with, and you don't even have to cite where you got it from. Copyrighted, on the other hand, are materials where you can't do anything at all without express permission from the creator. And content creators wanted some options between those two extremes, and Creative Commons provided that. What Creative Commons set up is very specific options that content creators can choose to determine what can and can't be done with their content. Let's start up here with the most free license. CC BY means you can do whatever you like with the resource, but you have to attribute where you got it from. And at the end of this presentation, we'll talk about how to attribute Creative Commons resources. CC BY SA means you have to attribute it, and you have to share what you create back with the same license. So the SA stands for share alike. So you share back out using the same license. NC means non-commercial, so you can't make money on the resource. And you can see here you can combine these options together to get more or less freedom. ND means non-derivative, which means you can use the resource, but you can't change it at all. And notice we're now in the realm of not open. This is another way to look at those licenses. It has a little bit more information, and if you go to the Creative Commons website, you'll have all sorts of information to work with. An additional thing to consider whenever you're putting multiple resources together is to make sure that the various licenses work with each other. So for example, the course we're creating is CC BY. And we're creating original content, but we're also bringing in a lot of other resources into our course. And this table shows what kind of resources we can use. So we can use public domain resources, we can use other CC BY resources, share alike we can use, as we can non-commercial. The only type of resources we can't use in our course is non-derivative. And that's because as soon as we've embedded the resource into our course, we've essentially changed it. So what I'd like to do for the rest of this presentation is go through some places where you can find images and talk about the licenses. The reason we're talking about images rather than textbooks is finding textbooks is a little bit more complicated, and we're going to have an entire presentation just on that. What I want to focus on here is how to identify the licenses. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about how to attribute what you find. So let's start with Wikimedia Commons. This is one of my favorite places to find images because nearly everything on here is open in some format. So let's say you're looking for a schematic of an automobile engine. You would type that into the search bar up here, and you notice you get a bunch of different images. When you click on one of these images, you can see, if you scroll down, you can see the license. So this one is CC BY SA, and it'll even tell you what that means. So each image in the Wikimedia Commons will have a license description down below. It'll also tell you who created it and a title. Another place to search for images is Google. So let's say we're looking for spoon-billed sandpipers. You would go to Google and select images, and that'll give you all sorts of images to look at. Now, when you first select images, you're going to get all sorts of things that are also copyrighted. So to limit the license, you want to click on Tools, and then Usage Rights, and then select what you want to do with it. So for example, labeled for reuse. So if we click on labeled for reuse, you'll notice we get some images. They're fewer than we had originally, but there's still plenty of options. So if you select one of these and you click on the Visit Page link, it'll take you to where that image came from. Now, important thing to consider when searching with Google Images is you don't necessarily want to trust that as your sole source of license information. Whenever you get to the original page, you always want to find the license information there. So notice this is public domain, meaning I can do whatever I like with it, and I don't even have to cite where I got it from. Now, I'll always include the link even if it's public domain, because that'll help me get back to the resource if I want to later. Another place to look for images is Flickr. And this is another photo sharing site where you would type in what you're looking for, so let's say Renoir, and at first you're going to get images that are all sorts of licenses. So folks that upload their pictures can copyright them, which means you don't want those, right? And so you click on License here and select the license you want. And again, that'll give us a subset of the final results, but still plenty of options. So if I click on one of these images, it'll give me the license down below the image. And notice this little person here, if we remember from earlier, that's CC BY, meaning I can do what I like, but I have to attribute it. But if I forget, there's always supposed to be a link to the Creative Commons site that tells you what that license means. Pixabay is another great place to find images. So let's say we're looking for volcanoes, we get lots of images. One of the nice things about Pixabay is these are all public domain. That's the only license option, except for the sponsored images. So these sponsored images are copyrighted, which means you can't use them. And you can see here it's got a watermark, and generally anything with a watermark is not going to be open. So if we click on one of these images, again, we can see here the public domain license, and you can download this image. Now, the Creative Commons site itself will also provide a search engine where, well, they don't call it a search engine, but they provide a resource where you can search a variety of different sites. So notice here's Google, Pixabay, Wikimedia Commons. So this is another place to go. Government sites are also a really great place to get images because any content created by a government official as part of their official work needs to be either public domain or at the very least CC BY. And so if we search here, in this case I search for MRSA, again we click images, and if we select one of these images, you'll notice here it is CC BY. And notice also this took us back to Flickr, but the person or the entity that created it is the National Institute of Health. And this is really cool. So a lot of these government agencies have posted these images in places where it's easy for us to find them. One of the other nice things about Flickr is that it has other images created by the same entity, and so you can scroll through those to see if there's anything else that would be helpful. So that's a couple of different places to find images. There are many more, but these tend to get me most of the images that I need. The next thing to consider, however, is what if I create something and I want to create an open resource? Now, by default, anything that you create is copyrighted. So if you don't do anything at all, your resource will be copyrighted. And that actually also relates back to if you find an image and there's not a specific license description, then you probably want to assume that it's copyrighted. But let's say you create something and you want to share it out as a Creative Commons license. So back to the Creative Commons site and click on Share Your Work. This will take you to a tutorial where it'll ask you a bunch of questions like, do you want to allow your work to be adapted, so changed? Do you want folks to be able to use your work commercially? And based on what you select, it'll give you the license. And what's really nice is it'll even give you something to cut and paste either here or even in an HTML format. So they've made it really easy for creators to add the Creative Commons license to their content. So that is finding images, finding licenses, and creating your own license. The last part of this is how do you attribute what you found? So again, Creative Commons, great website, talks about how you create proper attributions. So here's an image, and you can see here is the best possible attribution. So what the attribution should contain is a title. So here's the title. And notice the title is hyperlinked to where the image came from. And an easy way to create hyperlinks in most places, so it'll work in word processing, in Google Docs, and so on, is you type the title and then you click Control-K and put in the link there. So what you want is a title with a link, the author also with a link to the author's page, the source, where it came from, and the license. So here's the license, and again, notice the license is hyperlinked to the Creative Commons page that explains what that means. And down below here, it talks about other attributions that are okay, but not as good. So here's one, because the title isn't very clear, so just photo doesn't explain much. And it has all sorts of really wonderful information on this page. And if you notice in my presentation, all the images have attributions. And so this is something to get into the habit of doing whenever you use somebody else's work, just attribute it.